Hi, welcome to A Foreigner in the Philippines. Well, it's been raining heavy today, so we may not bother going down. And here we are. Here's some rainy day projects. A quick look at what I used to do before I came to the Philippines. It's an interesting lesson in how lives change and how we got to go with the flow. So I used to be for the painting, or for the photos that I'm about to show you, I was just discovering one aspect of what I do, and it was in one particular project which I learned a huge amount from. I've said on many other occasions how there was a friend of mine, Nick Carter, a great guy that was extremely perceptive. And one of his favourite books was, I think it was called The Sound of Silence by Carlos Castaneda. Somebody will correct me on that, for which I will be grateful. I'm sure it was The Sound of Silence. But anyway, Carlos Castaneda went to Mexico and he spent a lot of time with a Mexican Indian guru who taught him many things about himself. And then he came back and he wrote the book A Sound of Silence. So I didn't actually read that book. I never got that book. If anybody finds it, who's getting any books for people ask me what books would you like if we're sending a box, that might be one, Carlos Castaneda and The Sound of Silence. So I wouldn't mind reading that. Here we are 10 or 15, 20 years later from my friend Nick, and I'm asking to read the book that he recommended all that time ago. Carlos Castaneda made a point by talking about his guru Don Juan, and Don Juan, when Carlos Castaneda, I believe, if I remember it rightly, complained about someone who was making his life very difficult, Don Juan said, you should be grateful for this person, whoever he is, whatever capacity he is in, because he is a petty tyrant. Now you wouldn't think that anybody would welcome having a petty tyrant in his life, would you? But Don Juan made the point that when a petty tyrant comes into your life and demands impossible things, look at it this way. If you can please a petty tyrant, boy, you've really done it. Well, a petty tyrant came into my life when I was seeking to gain a particular lucrative and interesting, challenging project for a company that was called Modern Props. Now, you can go online and you can see Modern Props, and I'll show you one of the projects that I did for them. I went on to do for them. I made some consoles which were sci-fi consoles. Modern Props is a rental company that rents all kinds of props for people who are making movies. If you're making a movie about some, I don't know, kitchen sink drama, you're going to need a kitchen sink. If you're making a movie about, say, an Air Force or I don't know, a fighter pilot, you're going to need something that looks a little bit like the cockpit of a fighter plane. And that's what Modern Props do. And they, at the time, they were the premier prop rental company. And because of some contacts that I had prior to that, people speaking for me, they put me forward for this work, and I worked very hard for it. In the particular case of the one that I actually started off doing, it was a console for making movies that was a sci-fi console, and one of the parts of the project were to have, it was to be a console, a desk if you like, at which an actor would sit as if working a computer and looking at two computer screens. Well, those computer screens had to fit into the aperture that was made to exact measurements. Now, when I took my prototype, which I will show you in a minute, and I'll do a voiceover on it, when I took the prototype in, the owner of Modern Props was not exactly thrilled. He wasn't he wasn't certainly he was underwhelmed by my work, shall we say. And his two right-hand men, they really loved the piece that I'd made and urged the boss to consider and give me the project, because there were 6 of these consoles that needed to be made. In the event, he eventually bought the prototype that I was showing him, and which I corrected the fault that he spotted, and another 10 of the same console. Now, the second console that I made for them, you can actually see on their page. The last time I looked at Modern Props, that was the console that I made for them, and they have it on their front page still on their website. So you can still go on modernprops.com, and I'm sure that you will pull it up on Google, and you will see the piece that I'm going to show you was a photograph that I took in my workshop. In fact, I think the one that I'm showing you was the scale model. I learned from that first experience, which was a chastening experience, where he hauled me over the coals, criticized my work, and it wasn't pleasant. What happened was, he spotted that the 2 apertures which would take the monitors for the computers were not square. They were not perfectly square. Now, this man had a demon eye. He really criticized the work and was not particularly nice about it either. But when he was challenged by his 2 right-hand men, who said, "John, this is a great piece. He will make it square. He will correct that problem," meaning me. He said, "It's not square." "Yes, it's fine. It's not square." And then he said to somebody else that was standing by, "Go and bring me a square." And sure enough, he was right. It wasn't square. It was 1/8 of an inch out. Now this is, look at this, is 1/8 of an inch. So he'd spotted it, and no point in saying to a man who is paying for the best, "You're just nitpicking, it won't matter." He was paying what he thought was the best price, and he wanted the best. So he listened, though. In the end, he listened to his 2 advisors, and he said, "Okay, I'll go with it, but it has to be corrected." So I got the job, and I did it properly. Now, I treated that. I was about to tell him, because he wasn't very nice, I was about to tell him where he could put his prototype, square or not square, and I would help push it there, because it was making me really mad. And I didn't. And I remembered what my friend Nick Carter said about the petty tyrants. So I thought, well, this guy is being a petty tyrant. And though I may not like it, if I can please him, he's used to going to, he was quite accustomed to flying out to Italy, where he bought Italian designed and made furniture, which was top of the line. And that was the kind of perfection that he was used to. I was used to working with less detail than that, so I wasn't prepared for the kind of criticism that he gave me. Well, I went on and I completed it, so I'm going to click off here right now, and I'll start putting up a few of these photographs and where they led, and you'll just hear my voice instead of seeing my ugly old face. Well, this is the console. This was the prototype that I made, and this was the one that was criticized very badly by my ruthless petty tyrant, and he laid into me for that one. Now, as a result, here's another picture. Sorry, these are sideways, I can't do very much about it. That was the actual console, right? So that's what I gave to him, right? That was the prototype. And you can see there, let me see if I can find something to point. What would I find? Honey, could you give me a pen, please?
Here.
Thank you. So if you look there, here, these were the two apertures, and they had to fit, I've forgotten the measurement now, but something like 20 by 20, and they had to fit exactly because it would be an unrelenting, ungiving piece of equipment that would go in there, so it had to be absolutely right. Now what is 1/8 of an inch? What does 1/8 of an inch look like? Well, here's what 1/8 of an inch looks like. There's 1/8 of an inch, and it was 1/8 of an inch out of square, and he could see it. The man had eyes. So that was what happened there. Now, when his colleagues said, "John, he can do it. It will be a great piece. Don't knock it back, and he will put it right." And that was it. Well, the prototype, which was the one that I've just showed you, the prototype was to be mine. That was the idea. I didn't want it, but it was to be mine. But anyway, from the prototype, when you make a big series, which for my workshop was a big series, I had help. I had help from another artist, Becky Babb, who is the premier sculptor in Korean, and she does brilliant work, and she is centered somewhere around, I think it's Venice or Valencia, I'm not quite sure, just close to Fort Myers, and she helped me with that, plus my son Luke helped as well. So we turned out that whole 11 pieces which he bought. So that then led to other things. It led to other designs which were similar. First of all, I should show you, as you heard me say in the preamble, the next console which they gave me, it doesn't look complicated, but if you look carefully on it, you'll see that there is no straight angle. Every angle is a compound angle. That's about the only one that's square, but even that is compound. It's got an angle there, straight edge here, and it slopes from here back to here. All of the angles are all very awkward, very complicated. Well, first of all, this time I learned from my mistake, and I made this little guy here. And I made that was about 18 inches in size, and I took that to Mr. John at Modern Props, and I showed him that, and he liked it very much. He said, "Go ahead, I want you to make another," can't remember now whether it was 6 or 10 of these, and I made these. Now this is the one that you can see on their page, or certainly was the last time. This was the console that I made for them, and I made a long series of them, and they have featured that since on their front page. So what did that lead to? Well, I used ideas from that design when I made another console. Where can I show you that? Well, this is one. This is one that I made where I showed a similar thing. Now this one, the first one that I made for Modern Props, they didn't ask me to paint it. they would paint that themselves, and they would spray that so that the paint, if it got damaged, which it would when it was in hire for movies, it would probably get little nicks here and there, and they wanted it so that it was easily repaired and not some artistic special act, which you can see here. With this piece, I decorated it with rivets, made it look metal. It actually looked like metal, but it was in wood, and this was made so that it could be used for a recording studio. And the studio liked the pictures that I showed them of the modern props, and they asked me to make a console for them, and I made this console. You can see part of it there, and this one was to hold one of the keyboards. So let me see if I missed anything out there. Well, on to other things. One of the things that I love making is I like dinosaurs, but I like funny dinosaurs. Now this was the clay model for a coffee table, and it had a Disney-esque, a Wally Disney-esque, using Beth's term. It was a Walt Disney type of dinosaur, a sleeping triceratops beneath a coffee table. That was the idea, and there's a close-up of the face. He was a very friendly dinosaur. I also did these are smaller pieces, these dinosaurs. These are fun pieces to decorate. Decorate a desktop. I like the whimsical idea of the hands. See, he's going, oh for goodness sake, what is happening here? And he's got his hands. This one was quite tricky to mould, of course, because you've got holes in here, and it would require filling those holes so that they didn't take the moulding equipment and make it so it was impossible to get out. Here, you may recognize this, is Louis Armstrong. Now I used to enjoy making stuff like this. This one I called Buzz, and you can see Buzz has a diamond in his tooth. He has his cool sunglasses. He has one earring which reflects the diamond in his teeth, and he has his earphones. Little bit old-fashioned earphones. This was a few years ago, so those are the great big clunky earphones. You wouldn't see anybody dead in those now. But it was inspired by a black guy that I saw on, I think, YouTube. He called himself Flat Top, and I liked that look of Flat Top. Here's another picture of Eddie. Eddie, it was only when I coloured it in different way I put, let me see, Eddie had a gold tooth, which is more in the black culture. He had his square sunglasses, still has his earphones, but you can see more clearly that his hair is cut very sharply and in the style of blacktop. So let me see if there's anything on the other side of these that might be of interest. This one is another one of the desk type things that I did, where I made, let me see, that one is Louis Armstrong. Looks a little bit ghoulish, doesn't he, because it's done in a bronze finish. Now that one you might recognize as being the Tin Woodsman from The Wizard of Oz. That was for a commission that I made for 4 figures from The Wizard of Oz. I made the Tin Man, as you can see, slightly gay looking. He's got his blue eyeshadow on and the gothic lipstick, but that was how I saw it when I looked at the pictures the still pictures that I had for my reference looked a little bit like that. My son used to freak out when he used to come in sometimes and say, "It's looking at me." Let me see, what else? What are the goodies? I would get different commissions when I was working from my own shop. This I made for someone who wanted to market a fountain for pets to drink at, and she wanted something that would look unique. It had a little pump in here, and that would pump the water up and then it would come out. She noticed that her cat used to love going to the sink and drinking the water as it came from the faucet. So she said, "Could you use that as the inspiration for doing something?" And I said, "Yes, I can." So now, what else? This was a commission that I did for Drew Carey, and that was the interior of his back then new house that he had bought and was remodeling. Had terrible problems with that house because the neighbours were not very happy with all the noise that went on, and it slowed, and he had 3 or 4 different contractors. But what I was involved in was overseeing a light for, well, this was all a night sky. It was a sky at night, as you would see on a clear night. You would see the Milky Way, and there were fibre optics in there, and that's what that was for. And the fibre optics were part of the job. And then I did a faux paint on it. So where have I put the faux paint? Well, I'll find it eventually. Now this, unless it's on the other side of that. And there it is. Now this is a black light painting, only to be seen in black light. Now when I did that painting, obviously I worked alone on a big scaffolding under black light, and I worked in a blacked out room. That room was blacked out, and only I was working in there. And in fact you're working in the dark except for the black light which reflects off the ultraviolet paint, special paint. I finished that. It was a 900 square foot mural, a sky at night, and you can see here the various fibre optics that you can see coming through, and they were incorporated into my sky at night painting. Now it was already on quite an expensive faux finish on that ceiling, and when the lady who was apparently one of the architects and a supervisor on that saw what I'd done, she was panicked. She said, "You have ruined the ceiling. You've gone over the top. It's too much." So that was a panic for me, because I'd put a lot of time in on making that, and it was a stunning piece. Everybody else that came in loved it. So I had to implore her, "Please do not say anything when Mr. Carey comes in and looks." And it was Drew Carey, the comedian, that was paying for all of this. So if the lady was right, it would mean that the ceiling had to be done over twice. The faux painting underneath this one, and my painting of the ultraviolet light. Fortunately, when Mr. Carey came in, he was absolutely knocked out. His language was less than I would care to repeat here. In fact, I said to him, "Mr. Carey, do you think you could say something that I could quote you as saying?" He said, "It's incredible, thank you very much. This will be my favourite room. I've been to Death Valley, and I've seen the sky at night, and it's exactly like this. Thank you." So he was very happy, and it was a great success story for me. Now this is the console that I showed you earlier that came apart. Came apart so that this part here would be where the console itself went for doing recording, and then of course you had other pieces of equipment, and the other pieces of equipment would go into cabinets that were movable, and they were movable so that whenever you took them out and had to work on them, you wouldn't have to be crawling under a desk. You would have ample spare cable on all of the pieces of equipment. You'd be able to pull this out from here and it would be easy to work on it. That was the design, and the recording studio loved it. So that's pretty well what I wanted to show you for this one. It was some of my artwork. I'll do another one like this if people like it. I did quite a lot of different kinds of projects, but a lot of what I did faux painting, and I made things, as I put on this, I made things look like metal, and that's what I enjoyed doing that. And I made some doors. I made a lot of other different things. Maybe I can pull them out, as we've only been on for 15 minutes. Very short for me. Now this is an interesting project that I did. When I worked for the company that I've mentioned before, that's another picture there of the Drew Carey ceiling, 900 square feet. Now this is me in my younger days. Yes, I did have younger days. And what I'm working on there is at Universal Studio City Walk. And back then they wanted, from the company that I worked for, they wanted a T2, a Terminator, an endoskeleton robot, and they wanted it for their T2 3D ride, in which you go in and it's even the seats move when there's an earthquake and so on, and it's a physical experience. But then after that you would come down and you would see this Terminator robot. Of course I didn't make the T2 robot, but along with another friend of mine who worked at the same company, we built this. We took all of the parts, which were all chromium painted, 150 different parts, and between us we assembled this robot. And here's another picture. Now this was for a company called Icons Authentic Replicas. Had a checkered history, but it had some incredible people working for it, and the quality of the workmanship was excellent. One of those things where I regret that I didn't pay more attention, because I could have learned so much more than I did, which is a shame. What else can I show you? Well, while I was there, I was very interested in robotics, but only as an artistic static display. And this is one of the things that I built while I was there. I built a Scorpion robot, and the Scorpion robot is there. As I say, it's a static display, so we're looking at something which is not a moving display, it's static. Now it's self-supporting, it's made of wood, but it looks like metal, which was my speciality. I did full paint finishes. And you can see there that the tail, this is Scorpion Robot Baseball Catcher. The full title, a 25th century Scorpion Robot Baseball Catcher. And the idea was that back in the future, the age of the machine had passed through. People didn't like the machines. They'd fought for their freedom from the machine. The machine is happening now people are having robotic parts fitted to them now. They're having prosthetic arms and legs, and those arms actually work. They can hold things, they can grip things, they can do quite detailed stuff, and they are programmed in so that the person can hardly feel which is the metal. Believe it or not, this is what they actually have said on TED. I watched a lady on TED who had had a prosthetic arm fitted. She demonstrated it and she showed how very clever it was, and you can see there that this is wood, doesn't go anywhere, but the idea is that that's the tail, and there you can see, let me see if I can point it out, there, here look, that's the catcher's pad, and it would catch the ball and it would fire it back in the cannon. The lady that talked about her prosthetic arm getting all goofy and spooky again said that she could hardly feel which was real and which was the metal, which was the age of the machine. Steven Spielberg had in artificial intelligence in which there was a child robot who didn't know that he was a robot, and he had artificial intelligence, and he went through a situation where people were in rebellion against the whole idea of robots and their place in society and were destroying them, and he escaped destruction but later was rehabilitated much into the future because he'd gone under and remained perfect. But you'd have to watch the movie Artificial Intelligence. So the lady was saying, as I say, that she could hardly tell the difference, and that could be the issue in the future, the age of the machine, artificial intelligence, in which artificial intelligence creates itself. So robots would actually work on creating better robots. Imagine that, because eventually they would create themselves so much better that, well, then it would really be something, wouldn't it? We might well have a problem. Okay, so that's a few more of my little bits of paintings. As I say, I really liked robots. This was this was intended to be a young three-horned triceratops, which was in a land of fantasy, had a saddle on it and was a war horse, so to speak. So that was the idea there, and I liked that kind of thing. So here we have this was to be a mechanical flying horse, rocking horse. I never got to finish this because I left to come to Florida. Okay, Beth.
Yeah.
Can you get that, please?
Okay.
Can you get it? So this was actually very detailed. I would have loved to have been able to finish this, but the way that it worked, I didn't get to finish it. Sometimes this is what happens. But it was very detailed. It was made to have a what would have been a rather expensive silicone mold, and it would have been cast in fiberglass, which would have then been chrome plated. It would have been quite an impressive piece. here's another version of it, another photograph of it. You can see how the, where's my pen, my pointer, I've gone and lost it. There we are. You can see here all of it, it wouldn't have moved. All of this would have been static, of course, but it would have been a rocking horse. But here was where, if it had only been able to become robotic, this is where the joints would have been articulated. And all of this was layered so that you got the movement in the neck. Where's another? I think on the other side. Yeah, you can see there how the leg was supposed to move here with these joints. And that would have been a rocking horse which I would dearly love to have finished, but never did get to finish. Now this was a piece that I really loved making, because it was from, this is when I worked for the company, Icons Authentic Replicas, and I made this as a prototype, and the owner of what is now the defunct Icons International, as I know it, Icons Authentic Replicas no longer exists as far as I know, but this piece is still owned by the owner of that company, Jim Latta, who became a friend later, and he still has this piece. I would love to get up there sometime and refurbish it. It probably needs a lick of the right kind of lacquer. But anyway, that was made specially for that piece. Now that was part of a series of pieces that I made, which I called the Batman furniture. As you can see, kind of very gothic looking. This was like a conference table, very mechanical looking, with a glass, heavy glass top. And this one, well, I guess you don't need to know who that is, don't need to be told that is. That one I made, as I said, for a company that was in Chicago. And here is another one. Yes, that's me in my younger days, and yes, I did have younger days. Where are we? So let me see, that would have been, how old was I then? I was about 65, 67 there, and still not looking too bad. So that's my little trip through my portfolio, such as it is. I thank you for looking in, and at another time maybe we will even get to do some projects and show how they evolve. So I thank you for looking in. Here's where we started. Don't ever give up because you have a petty tyrant. You should thank your lucky stars that you have a petty tyrant. Because if you persevere, it could turn out very well. So there's 3 of the final consoles, the way that they evolved. Thank you for your help in the past, for supporting our channel, for doing all of that good stuff, and I hope that you have enjoyed looking at what we do. This is a foreigner in the Philippines. Thank you for watching. Bye.